I'm 38 now, the kind of adult who keeps receipts in labeled envelopes and flinches when the phone rings after 10 p.m. I work a job that sounds respectable at parties and feels like being slowly sanded down in real life. Until 3 weeks ago, my biggest adrenaline rush was finding a parking spot downtown. Then I bought a lottery ticket. Not because I had a feeling. Not because I'm spiritual or lucky. I grabbed it at the gas station while my coffee dripped onto my hand, and the clerk was talking about the weather like it mattered. I scratched it in my car, under the buzzing fluorescent light, half listening to a song I used to love. When the numbers lined up, my brain refused to translate it. It was like staring at a foreign language you should know. $30 million. That number didn't feel like money. It felt like a door slamming open somewhere behind me. Because the first thing I thought wasn't, I'm free. It was him. It was that summer when I was 17 and I did something I still haven't said out loud. Not in full, not without changing the subject. The kind of memory you keep folded small, tucked behind your ribs, until something heavy enough makes it unfold. When I was 17, I lived in a town where everyone's story was written for them before they even graduated. My mom worked doubles at the diner off Route 6. My dad was between jobs, in the way that lasted years, and my biggest dream was getting out without leaving pieces of myself behind. Evan was my best friend. Not school friend. Not we hang out sometimes. Best friend. The kind who knew my mood by the way I shut a car door. We spent that whole summer glued together. Late-night convenience store runs, pool hopping, sitting on the hood of his rusted Civic watching thunderstorms roll in like the sky was angry too. Then the scholarship rumor happened. Evan's family had money, or at least enough to pretend they didn't worry. He'd been talking about this state program, full ride, the kind of thing kids like me whispered about like it was a myth. I wanted it too. We both applied. We both waited. The night before decisions posted, I was at his house helping him study. Meaning we were just avoiding thinking. His mom had left papers on the kitchen counter. Forms, copies, passwords scribbled on a sticky note like they were nothing. I remember standing there, the fridge humming, my own heartbeat loud in my ears, and I made a choice that felt small in the moment. It wasn't. The fallout was immediate and ugly in the way only small towns can manage. Evan found out within a week. I still don't know exactly how, whether the system flagged it or his mom noticed something off, but suddenly my name was being said in rooms I wasn't in. Not quietly, not kindly. He confronted me behind the school gym, the asphalt still warm from the sun. I remember his hands shaking, not with anger at first, but confusion. He kept saying, "Just tell me what happened." Like there was still a version of the story where I hadn't crossed the line. I lied. Not convincingly. Not completely. Just enough to make it worse. The scholarship vanished for both of us. They called it an irregularity. That word followed me like a bad smell. Evan stopped answering my texts. His parents stopped smiling when they saw me. At graduation, he sat 3 rows away, close enough that I could hear him laugh with someone else, far enough that it felt intentional. Word got around. Teachers looked at me differently. Friends picked sides without ever asking mine. By August, Evan had deferred enrollment and left town. I stayed. I took shifts at the diner with my mom, telling myself I deserved it. That summer ended with silence, and the kind of shame that sinks in deep and learns your name. Decades is a dramatic word, but time stretches when nothing ever gets resolved. I stayed in town for community college, then transferred, then settled into a life that looked fine from the outside. New city, new friends who never knew Evan's name, jobs that paid rent and distracted me just enough. On paper, I moved on. Inside, the story kept looping. Every few years I'd Google him, then close the tab before the results loaded, like I could outrun the past by not letting it buffer. I rehearsed apologies in the shower. I imagined running into him at a grocery store, both of us older, softer, pretending it didn't still hurt. Sometimes I convinced myself he'd forgotten. Other times I was sure I'd ruined his life. Money was always tight. Not desperate, but close enough that it stayed on my mind. Every bill felt like proof that choices echo. When coworkers joked about what they'd do if they won the lottery, I laughed along and thought about how I already knew exactly what regret cost. Birthdays passed. My mom got older. My dad drifted out of the picture completely. The town faded into a place I only visited for funerals. Evan stayed frozen at 17 in my head. Sunburned, hopeful, trusting me with things he shouldn't have. I told myself some mistakes don't get endings. They just get carried. Then I bought that ticket. The email came 2 days after I verified the numbers for the 5th time and still didn't believe them. I was sitting on my couch, staring at the wall like it might blink first, when my phone buzzed with a notification I almost ignored. Subject line, long shot, no last name, just a first name I hadn't seen on my screen in over 20 years. Evan. For a full minute, I didn't open it. My chest went tight in that old, familiar way, like my body recognized the danger before my brain caught up. I wondered if this was a scam, some cruel algorithm dredging up ghosts now that I'd finally been handed something good. I wondered if he'd somehow heard about the ticket already, even though I told no one except the lawyer who kept calling me sir, like that made it real. When I finally tapped it, the message was short, careful, like he'd rewritten it a dozen times. He said he'd seen my name in a local news blurb, something about anonymous winner from the county. He said he didn't know if it was me. He said he'd thought about reaching out for years and never had the nerve. Then one line at the end, like a hook buried deep. There's something you never knew about that summer. I dropped my phone, literally let it slip from my hand onto the carpet like it had weight. The past didn't knock. It waited, and now it was standing in my living room asking to sit down. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there listening to the refrigerator click on and off, my brain replaying 17-year-old moments like they were happening in real time. My stomach felt hollow, the same way it did back then when I knew I'd crossed a line and couldn't uncross it. Winning $30 million was supposed to feel like relief. Instead, it felt like being exposed. By morning, I'd convinced myself not to respond. Then I made coffee and spilled it, and the smell dragged me straight back to that gas station. I realized how stupid it was to think I could outrun this forever. Money doesn't erase gravity. It just makes the fall louder. I picked up my phone and typed. Deleted. Typed again. My hands were shaking in a way that embarrassed me. I hadn't felt this kind of fear in years, the kind that sits behind your eyes and blurs everything else. Not fear of him yelling. Fear of him being calm. Of him telling me he'd already made peace, and that I was the only one still trapped. I kept rereading that last line. Something you never knew. It made my chest tighten with a hope I didn't trust. Hope is dangerous when you're already guilty. Finally, I wrote back. Just a sentence. I'm here. I'll listen. When he replied almost immediately, I realized this wasn't sudden for him. It was sudden for me, and whatever he was about to say had been waiting a long time to land. We talked on the phone that night. Not video, just audio, like we were kids again sneaking calls after midnight. Hearing his voice was worse than I expected. Not angry, not cold. Older, slower, like time had actually touched him, even if it had left me behind. He started with small things. Asked about my mom. Told me his dad passed a few years back. We circled the real subject like it was a wound neither of us wanted to poke first. Finally, I said his name the way I used to, soft at the end, and everything cracked open. I never meant to hurt you, I said, which sounded useless the second it left my mouth. There was a pause, long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then he exhaled, sharp and shaky. I know, he said. That's the thing. I didn't then, but I do now. He asked me if I remembered his mom's paperwork, the sticky note, the password. My throat closed. I said yes. He said he figured. But then he said something that knocked the air out of me. The scholarship was already gone before you touched anything. I sat up so fast my head spun. He told me there'd been another issue. Something buried. Something no one ever explained to me. And as he talked, I realized the story I'd carried for decades might not be the whole one. He told me the committee had flagged his application weeks earlier. His dad's business, the one everyone thought was just comfortable, had been under investigation for fraud. Nothing public yet. Nothing Evan knew about at 17. but enough that the scholarship board quietly disqualified him before decisions ever posted. "The night you were at my house," he said, voice tight. "My mom already knew. That's why the papers were out. She was scrambling, calling lawyers, trying to see if there was a way around it." I felt sick. My hands went numb. All those years I'd believed I'd been the singular reason everything collapsed. And the truth was messier, crueler. He said when the system showed irregular access, it gave them a clean excuse to pull everything without exposing his family. An easy villain. A simple story. "And you," he added gently, "you were just convenient." I didn't know whether to cry or laugh or apologize again. He said he'd figured it out years later, after his dad was convicted and the timelines finally lined up. By then, the damage between us was already fossilized. Then he went quiet for a beat. "When I saw you won the lottery," he said, "it felt cosmic, like the universe finally admitting it misplaced the blame. The money wasn't random anymore. It was tangled up in a lie I'd been punishing myself for, and a truth that came far too late to change who we'd become." After we hung up, I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, staring at nothing. The truth didn't feel like relief the way I'd always imagined it would. It felt destabilizing, like someone had reached into my chest and rearranged the furniture without asking. For 20 years, I'd built my identity around being the villain who deserved exactly what he got. Every stalled dream, every compromise, every time I told myself this is enough for someone like me. All of it rested on that foundation. Now it was cracked. I kept thinking about the choices I made because of that shame. The jobs I didn't apply for. The relationships I sabotaged before anyone could get close enough to see the rot. I'd worn guilt like a weighted vest, convinced it kept me grounded, when really it was just holding me underwater. And the money, Jesus. $30 million suddenly felt less like luck and more like a question. What do you do when the story you've used to measure your worth turns out to be wrong? When the universe hands you proof that punishment isn't always proportional and redemption doesn't arrive on schedule. I wanted to call Evan back. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rewind my life and live it without flinching. Instead, I sat there, realizing the past hadn't just shaped me. It had lied to me, and I'd believed it because it hurt in a way that felt earned. The confrontation wasn't dramatic the way movies sell it. No shouting, no slammed doors. It happened inside me quietly over the next few days, and it was worse for that. I'd be in the shower and suddenly feel the spike of anger so sharp I had to grip the tile. Not at Evan, at myself, at the years I'd spent kneeling to a story that wasn't even true. I kept replaying that moment in his kitchen. The fridge hum, the sticky note, my hand hovering. I had still crossed a line. I hadn't known the full truth, but I'd been willing to hurt my best friend to escape a life I was scared of. That part didn't get erased just because the scholarship was already doomed. The nuance made it harder, not easier. One night, I opened the spreadsheet my financial advisor sent over and stared at the numbers until they blurred. $30 million, and I felt poorer than ever. Angry at the universe for timing the reveal like a punchline. Angry that Evan had carried this alone for so long. Angry that I couldn't cleanly hate myself anymore, because self-hatred had been simpler. I typed out a message to him I never sent. Pages of it. Apologies tangled with accusations. Gratitude mixed with resentment. In the end, I realized the real fight wasn't with Evan at all. It was with the version of me that had accepted lifelong punishment without ever asking if it was deserved. When Evan finally spoke again, it wasn't to absolve me or reopen old wounds for sport. He wanted me to understand his side the way he never had the words for back then. We met in person, halfway between our cities, at a diner that smelled like burnt toast and disinfectant. Neutral ground. Safe. He looked different, softer around the eyes, carrying his past like something heavy but familiar. Over coffee, he told me what it was like after I left town, how his dad's arrest detonated everything. Friends vanished. His mom drank. College became impossible not because of money, but because of shame. I blamed you because it was easier, he admitted, staring into his cup. You were one person. What my family did was bigger than I could process. He told me he'd thought about reaching out 100 times, then decided I deserved peace, even if he didn't get closure. Hearing that twisted something in my chest. We'd both been protecting each other in the dumbest way possible, through silence. When the check came, he laughed and said, "Guess I should let the millionaire cover this." I did. Not because I could, but because it felt like a tiny, symbolic correction. For the first time in decades, the story belonged to both of us. And it was finally being told out loud. The climax didn't hit like a thunderclap. It came in waves, quiet and relentless. Right there in that diner booth. Evan reached into his jacket and slid an envelope across the table. Old, creased. My name handwritten on the front in his messy, teenage scrawl. "I wrote this when I was 18, he said. "Never sent it." My hands shook opening it. Inside was an apology from him. Pages of it. He wrote about blaming me because he needed something solid to aim his anger at. About how he'd known, even then, that the punishment didn't fit the crime, but he'd let it happen because it gave his family cover. One line wrecked me completely. "I think if I'd told the truth, you might have gotten out. And I wasn't ready to lose you and still be stuck here." I broke. Full on, ugly, crying in a public diner, shoulders shaking, face in my hands. Decades of held breath came rushing out. I told him everything I'd never said. The fear, the guilt, the way I'd shrunk my life down to something survivable. He listened, didn't interrupt, didn't defend himself. When I finally looked up, he said, "I don't need your money. I just needed you to know." That was the moment. Not the win, not the truth. But realizing forgiveness doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives when two people finally stop lying to themselves at the same time. After that day, I had to decide what forgiveness actually meant in practice. Couldn't just be a feeling I wrote home and then folded away like the letter. Forgiveness, I realized, is active. It asks something of you. It demands movement. I told Evan I didn't want to pretend we could just pick up where we left off. Too much time had passed. Too many versions of ourselves had lived whole lives in between. But I also told him I didn't want silence anymore. Not the polite, distant kind that feels mature but still hurts at 3 in the morning. So I made a decision that scared me more than buying that lottery ticket ever did. I stopped hiding. I told my mom the full story, start to finish, without editing myself into the villain or the hero. I told my closest friend why I'd always joked about being bad with money, when what I really meant was bad with hope. With Evan, we agreed to start small. Texts, occasional calls, no pressure to fix everything. Just honesty even when it was uncomfortable. I also set aside a portion of the money, not for guilt, not for penance, but for choice. Therapy, time off, the freedom to rebuild without constantly looking over my shoulder. For the first time since I was 17, my future felt unwritten. And that was terrifying, but it was also mine. The changes didn't come all at once. There was no montage where everything snapped into focus and suddenly I was healed, generous, glowing. It was slower than that, quieter, but undeniable. I left my job without the usual panic, gave notice like a normal person instead of hoarding security out of fear. I moved apartments not because the old one was bad, but because it held too many versions of me that thought small was safer. Money stopped being this looming, abstract threat and became a tool I had to learn how to hold without flinching. I hired professionals. I set boundaries. I said no to people who suddenly remembered my name. The biggest shift wasn't external, though. It was the way my shoulders sat. Lower, less braced. Evan and I didn't become inseparable again, but we became real. We met a few more times, laughed about things that had nothing to do with the past. When conversations drifted back there, they didn't sting the same way. The story had lost its power to define us. I started sleeping through the night. I applied for things I wanted, not just things I thought I deserved. Sometimes I still catch myself waiting for punishment, for the universe to correct itself. But it doesn't. Instead, life keeps going. And for the first time, I'm going with it instead of dragging old ghosts behind me, mistaking their weight for who I am. I still think about the ticket sometimes. Not the money itself, but the randomness of it. How something so careless, Coffee burning my hand, a bored clerk, a line I almost didn't stand in. Ended up cracking open a story I'd been living inside for most of my life. I used to believe fate was precise, that you get what you earn, good or bad, and carry it quietly. Now I think fate is messier. It hands you things out of order. It withholds explanations until you're finally capable of hearing them. Winning $30 million didn't fix me. It didn't erase what I did at 17, or what Evan lost, or the years we both spent misunderstanding each other. What it did was force the truth into the light, because money amplifies everything it touches, including unfinished business. I learned that guilt can become a hiding place if you stay in it long enough. That forgiveness doesn't mean innocence, and understanding doesn't mean there was no harm. It just means the story gets bigger than the worst thing you ever did. If there's a lesson here, it's this: don't wait for something extraordinary to give you permission to revisit the past. Time doesn't heal what you refuse to look at. Sometimes luck isn't about winning. Sometimes it's about finally losing the lie you've been using to survive.